He called my career filthy, then begged for $140,000. Just over a year ago, my father stood up at a family party, raised his glass, and publicly stripped me of my inheritance. His reason? He called the successful company I built from nothing a useless foul fancy. Fast forward 6 months, my brother, Silas, had run their family legacy straight into the ground. I got a call, and he wasn't calling to apologize. He was begging for $140,000 to save the very name he said I had disgraced. In that moment, I realized the family I thought I knew saw me as nothing more than a convenient ATM. You need to hear what I told him. Before we start, I want to know, have you ever been the backup plan for your own family? Drop a quick comment below. I'm reading every single one.
My old man called my career a fleeting childish fancy and promptly cut me out of the entire family estate. Yet he later had the nerve to ask for $140,000 when my brother, Silas, tanked the family's importing business. I'm Ethan Blackwood, a 32-year-old marine tech startup manager in San Francisco, California, where the stable, well-paying work, my condo, electric car, and well-lit office allow me to dive into work late into the night. A stranger might think I'm lucky and that a proud, loving family is my foundation, but that's a mistake I corrected exactly a year ago when I vividly recall standing at a massive family gathering and saying I'm severing all ties effectively immediately. It was not a casual decision, but a forced choice made from the sharp edge of quiet resentment and deep disappointment to shatter a pattern, and I tell this story not to assign blame, but to etch this truth into my mind. To truly feel alive, you must be prepared to lose what you once deemed irreplaceable. I walked away from my family on a sunny Memorial Day weekend last year without a hint of regret, leaving my apartment early to cruise past joggers and early commuters, inwardly relieved that the family would soon be all together again. Being punctual has always meant showing up a full 15 minutes before the scheduled time, and when I arrived at the house, it was already buzzing with loud chatter and forced laughter, feeling more crowded than any previous holiday with relatives from every corner of the state. My mother had hinted that Dad had an especially big announcement, so I placed her specific lemon tart from the Mission District carefully on the kitchen counter, an offering, like the decent single malt whiskey, rare imported cigars, or white lilies I'd brought in recent years that never truly bridged the gap between us. 20 minutes later, the celebration kicked off with strange normalcy. Expensive crystal glasses were clinking, the smell of smoked salmon and roasted potatoes filled the air, and the usual talk of commercial property deals, quarterly stock reports, and private school applications dominated the room, all while I ate my meal in silence from the far corner of the table, not participating or feeling any obligation to. Roughly 30 minutes after everyone had found their spots, my dad, Mr. Blackwood, stood up, lifted his glass of fine wine, and spoke in his powerful, authoritative voice, declaring, "Everyone, please, a moment of quiet. We have something essential to share with you all." The expansive room went immediately silent as he announced, "The family has finalized a major decision. Effective today, all the company's holdings, including its major assets, the entire share portfolio, and all real estate will be formally transferred to my son, Silas." My heart skipped half a beat, and just as I expected, the applause that followed was deafening and excessively enthusiastic, followed by my mother, Mrs. Blackwood, whose eyes shone as she said, "Silas has been managing the company's operations for 5 years now, and he is the one destined to carry on our family's legacy and elevate it to new heights." I sat perfectly still, staring intently at my glass of iced water, feeling its biting cold, but not soothing the dull, growing pain in my chest as waves of celebratory applause crashed against my chair. Nobody bothered to ask for my thoughts, not a soul even glanced in my direction, and no one dared to ask, "What about Ethan?" I was physically present yet completely invisible, as they had unilaterally decided I was no longer a part of the family's narrative, a dismissal that was a shock, even though I understood their preference for my younger brother, Silas, who is 3 years my junior. We weren't inseparable as kids, but we never had major conflicts, and because my early childhood was characterized by an emphasis on fairness, 2 birthday cakes, 2 identical bags of candy, 2 practically identical bicycles, and the same punishment when we got into trouble, I truly believed our parents viewed us as equals. I clung to the belief that my family was fundamentally fair until I reached the age of 19, sitting in the main living room on a cool September evening when my father learned I had aspirations to study marine conservation technology, a marine tech specialist, and after securing a partial scholarship, I just required a little financial support. I expected him to ask about my career goals or offer advice, but instead, he sat there with his arms tightly crossed, his gaze hard and cold, and declared, "I will not be contributing a single dime to that absurd career path. If that is your choice, you are entirely on your own." With that single devastating sentence, I lost all hope in what I thought the concept of family truly meant, and I didn't understand how a vocational choice could make me feel like a complete outcast. But it took years to finally realize that my decisions simply didn't align with their predetermined master plan. Following that night, I was no longer viewed as the family's hopeful successor, a role that gradually shifted to Silas, and everything began to subtly change through a slow, quiet, progressive detachment rather than overt, harsh words or constant disapproval, making me increasingly quiet over the years, which was perhaps the steep price you paid for deliberately straying from their established route. Even though we were drifting apart, I never abandoned them when they genuinely needed assistance, continuing to send my mother her beloved Mother's Day roses, helping when Dad required an upgrade to the central ventilation system, and kept showing up even when the main business was struggling financially, never tracking who owed whom, which is why the ultimate betrayal felt so profoundly painful. Because it originated from the one man I was certain would never treat me as an absolute stranger. My father. 1 year prior, he called me late one night, his voice unusually strained and low, and confessed that the company was in a severe financial crisis, needing $140,000 immediately to prevent total collapse after a critical supply contract fell through at the 11th hour. I suggested drafting a formal loan agreement or getting my significant financial contribution properly documented, but he shut that idea down instantly, placating me with a single, simple sentence: "When your mother and I are no longer here, you will still receive a full share of the company's worth. This is our family's legacy, after all." At that moment, I asked for nothing further, and I personally wired $140,000 directly to the company's main account the very next morning. A month later, I stared at that figure on my bank screen, totally shocked, kind of nervous, and wondering if I was dreaming. But the number just kept going up. Only 9 months after that, I hit 1 million subscribers on the video platform, and I had well over 2 million followers across all my sites in just 12 months. Then the big marine tech and equipment companies started reaching out, wanting to collaborate, sponsor my videos, and send me their new gear to test and review. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a side project anymore. It had blown up into something way bigger. Eventually, with tons of community support, I opened my first marine tech maintenance shop. I called it Tides and Tools because I wanted to share reliable knowledge and dedicated service, which was something my family never really gave me when I was younger. My first little place was way more successful than I ever imagined, maybe because of the loyal audience from my early videos, or maybe because clients could just sense that I treated every customer from total beginner to expert with genuine respect. After a few months, I had to hire more staff, extend my hours, and start hunting for a second location, which opened exactly 1 year later. 4 years after that, Tides and Tools boasted 7 successful workshops across the city and over 30 dedicated full-time and part-time employees. A bunch of them have been with me since the start, and even the new faces are a vital part of my chosen family. I made a deliberate effort not to brag about any of my success, especially not to my biological family or close relatives. I learned that from a longtime industry mentor when I was just starting out, who gave me a warning I still remember. Never parade your financial success, not even to your own parents. Back then, I didn't get it. Why wouldn't you tell your family about good stuff? But as I grew up, I finally understood.
Everyone gets jealous, some way more than others, and showing off your achievements doesn't just get you admiration, it basically implies an open checkbook. They instantly figure they can hit you up for loans, brilliant business strategies, or endless help since we are family. When you inevitably say no, that admiration quickly turns into harsh resentment. So I kept quiet. I still showed up for mandatory holiday gatherings, bringing the usual pastries, little presents, and maybe a high-quality bottle of whiskey or a thoughtful gift from Mom. But I never once mentioned my finances, my staff numbers, or any new construction projects. They still saw me as Ethan, the quirky marine tech repairman, and honestly, I preferred it that way. About 6 months after that disastrous Memorial Day dinner, I didn't send a single text, make a call, or return to their house. My parents, Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood, were just as silent. Zero supportive check-in messages, no random calls. It was eerily quiet, like my disappearance was exactly what they had secretly planned. I wasn't sad. In those initial few weeks, waking up without the pressure to check for my mother's messages felt like a huge weight had been lifted. Every single night, I was finally able to sit alone in my quiet apartment, sip my late-night coffee, and work without being forcefully pulled back into that exhausting sense of family obligation. For the first time in years, I could finally name the sensation: freedom. However, 6 months ago, my phone vibrated loudly as I was pouring a second cup of coffee on a calm Saturday morning. It was Dad. His recognizable name flashed on the screen, and I instinctively froze in the kitchen. I held the half-full coffee mug with my thumb hovering right over the decline button, but I didn't touch it. For a fleeting, ludicrous moment, I entertained the possibility that they had completely changed their minds, daring to imagine a call dedicated to offering an apology. I still don't know why I let myself think that. Maybe a microscopic shred of hope still remained that they had seriously reflected on everything that had transpired that horrible night. A few more rings later, I answered. My father's voice came through immediately. No preamble or hesitation, and he cut right to it. Ethan, the company is in dire straits again. Silas made a colossal error and signed the wrong agreement. Now we're facing $140,000 in severe contract damages. Can you bail us out for the sake of the family's honor? For the Blackwood name? Without any thought, I snapped back, $95,000 was already more than enough, Dad. If you truly want my help, begin by paying back that initial debt. The line went totally silent. He was probably furious or disappointed, but I honestly didn't care anymore. I continued before he could formulate a comeback. And if the only thing you're concerned about saving is the family name, let me remind you that name never once stood up to defend me. I disconnected and let them figure out the $140,000 catastrophe entirely on their own. After rejecting my father's plea on the phone the previous day, I foolishly assumed they would finally leave me alone. I was horribly mistaken. The very next morning, my doorbell started ringing, loudly, rapidly, and persistently just past 7 a.m. There was no sense of courtesy, just pushy, forceful, demanding rings as if someone was trying to force entry. I waited a moment before opening the door to find Silas, my mother, and my father all crammed together on my doorstep. I didn't offer an invitation. I deliberately used my body to fully block the entrance at the threshold, sending a clear message that this was no longer shared territory. I knew exactly why they were there, so I stated it clearly but calmly. If you are here for the $140,000, please turn around and leave now. I will not be helping you. My words, despite my low volume, resonated clearly through the quiet hallway. As soon as I finished, my mother recoiled slightly. Something other than tears made her eyes look strained and crimson. Maybe it was stress, maybe deep disappointment, or maybe even pure rage.
The only thing that sounded like a contract was my dad's super quiet remarks after a long phone silence. When your mother and I are gone, you will still receive a full share of the company. This is family business. I just nodded, stupidly accepting that heavy emphasis on the word family. Now I realize I should have definitely gotten a signed contract. Seriously, some people only remember the value of family when they're desperate for a favor. Fast forward to that Memorial Day party last year when my father announced Silas was getting everything. I didn't stay quiet like a million times before. My voice was surprisingly loud and steady when I asked, "And what about me?" The question basically stopped the wine glasses mid-clink. The whole room just froze in a thick, awkward silence. Some relatives looked at me like they suddenly remembered I was there. I even heard whispers across the dining hall. "Wait, what about Ethan? He's Silas's older brother." As the tension got heavier, Mom quickly jumped in with her usual overly sweet tone, trying to make this whole cruel thing sound totally reasonable. "Ethan, dear, you already have a successful company, a beautiful home, and a great car. But Silas, he is starting fresh. He has nothing." I just stared right into her eyes and spoke calmly, but every word was a punch. That successful career, I built it with my own two hands. I left your house at 19 and figured out every single step on my own. I never took a cent from you or Dad. I won a scholarship, worked 3 jobs through university, and saved every dollar. Meanwhile, you financed every penny of Silas's education and completely covered all his personal expenses. And now you publicly hand everything over to him as if I was never your son? I am your son too. Before anyone could reply, Silas piped up all smug, "Mom's correct. You shouldn't even be trying to compete with me." I spun around and glared at him. "Shut your mouth, Silas. You don't possess the right to speak to me." Silence. Then Dad slammed his hand on the table, his voice strained and cutting like a slap. "That is quite enough, Ethan. Silas chose to follow the route we planned for him. You did not. If you hadn't decided to work with those useless, foul bits of technology, this entire company would have been yours." I was stunned. Then I hit back. "What in God's name are you ranting about? That's a disgusting personal insult. Do you even comprehend that it was thanks to those so-called useless bits that I managed to accumulate the $95,000 that prevented your company's failure? And if you truly despise my profession that much, pay me back that money right this minute." He shot to his feet, red-faced, eyes blazing, and roared, "I am not giving you a damned cent back. I brought you into this world, I provided for you, I fed you, and I educated you. Do you have any idea how much capital I expended on you? And now you're out there tinkering with cheap underwater equipment? You are a complete embarrassment." That appalling statement was it. I was irrevocably finished. After what felt like 30 agonizing seconds, I forced myself to speak steadily. "If that is truly how you feel, then we have absolutely nothing to do with each other from this day forward. Don't ever try to find me again." I turned to leave but paused for a final word, not an apology. "Dad, I never petitioned to be born, so please never again throw your so-called sacrifices in my face in an attempt to guilt me into following your chosen path. And stop using them as a tool to leverage me into carrying the immense financial burden of this family." I walked out with my head held high and didn't look back once. I was back in my condo before 9 p.m. and immediately got into the shower, turning the water to maximum heat, desperate to wash away the massive anger, the lingering injustice, and the profound hurt from that awful evening. After nearly 20 minutes, I felt physically lighter and my mind was less burdened, but that cold, unnerving emptiness persisted. I brewed a huge mug of steaming black coffee to force myself to stay awake, and as I sat quietly by the window, my mind wandered back to the day I turned 19, and left my childhood home with nothing but an old, heavy backpack, a few essential items of clothing, and the little savings I'd managed to accumulate. Even while working multiple part-time jobs, I struggled desperately to cover basic living expenses. My parents never once inquired if I was doing all right throughout those early lean years. My first 2 years after graduation were spent confined to a tiny, basic studio apartment, struggling every month to pay off the student loans. And then in my 3rd year, something totally unexpected happened one calm Sunday afternoon. I had no specific plans, but I was struck by a quirky thought. Why not record a helpful marine tech maintenance video? I improvised a tripod with heavy textbooks and empty shoeboxes, propped up my phone, and spoke into the camera as if I were talking to a close friend. After editing, I uploaded the video to a popular video sharing platform and a social media site, purely for fun with zero expectations. Within 2 days, it completely blew up, going viral, and within 48 hours, the platforms were reporting almost 3 million views. I was absolutely staggered, convinced it was a technical glitch, but when the flood of comments and direct messages started pouring in, I understood that people were genuinely craving the knowledge I had to share. I started producing more content with the sole motivation of freely sharing expertise, and soon after, I received my first payment of $2,500 from integrated ads and sponsorships.
Since she had nowhere left to go, Mom spoke next, trying to sound gentle, but her voice was super tight. Ethan, you operate an entire chain of successful marine technology repair shops. $140,000 is merely pocket change to you. I am imploring you. If you refuse to help, this company will utterly collapse. Our entire family will lose everything. Silas shuffled a bit closer, and I totally ignored him. I'd never heard his voice sound so small and quiet. Ethan, please, just this one time. I know I made a disastrous mistake. I know I ruined everything. I just stood there silently, letting them talk, keeping my composure absolute. I just stared, gripping the doorframe like my whole resolve would crumble if I let go. After a long, awkward pause, I replied slowly and with chilling clarity. Get off my property before I am forced to call the police. Dad's face instantly went hard. Mom opened her mouth to plead more, but I cut her off, repeating my statement louder so there was zero confusion. I have absolutely nothing to do with any of you anymore. You all must now live with the severe consequences of your choices, your blatant favoritism, and your absolute silence. Silas, that includes you. If the company fails, that is not a senseless tragedy. It is a direct consequence, and I am not the man responsible for saving anyone. I closed the door, a firm, final gesture. Once I confirmed they had left, I returned to my now cold coffee. But my mind was already racing in a new, worrying direction. A chilling question whispered through my thoughts, stopping my coffee cup mid-sip. How did they discover I own 7 separate shops? I never told them, never mentioned it, and always kept a careful distance, even at the rare family gatherings before everything spectacularly fell apart. I never discussed the scale of my enterprise or my actual profits. They didn't follow me on any professional social media accounts. Then the obvious answer hit me, my video platform. I still regularly upload my gentle, informative marine tech clips there about my specialized field and my deep passion for ocean health. Someone they knew must have forwarded them a link, or maybe they just found it themselves through searching. That realization sent a severe shudder down my spine, not because I feared being discovered, but because I knew precisely what they turned into the moment they sensed a clear opportunity for financial exploitation. I acted right away, unlocking my phone's messaging screen and typing each phrase out clearly, the sentences feeling like the final, inescapable closing of a gate. If you, Mom, or Silas take any form of public action that might intentionally damage my professional reputation or my business, I will initiate a lawsuit. I am deadly serious. After hitting send, I just hoped they wouldn't dare to cross that specific line. Silas, however, completely ignored my clear, formal warning. The very next day, he posted a long tirade on various social media platforms. I didn't read it right away, but friends quickly sent it to me, and I was soon fielding calls and pointed questions from shop employees and local media. I didn't even need to read every word to grasp the complete essence of his writing. His post deliberately framed me as someone who had cruelly abandoned my immediate family when they were on the brink of bankruptcy, harshly ignored my elderly parents' heartfelt pleas for aid, and explicitly stated that I had brutally expelled them from my home like they were common strangers. Naturally, he also included a note that I had mistreated my own blood before. The narrative was so deliberately distorted that I couldn't even figure out what threads of reality remained. People don't genuinely care about the actual truth. They only crave an emotionally charged story featuring a cold, wealthy villain, a desperate, innocent family, and a terrible public ending they can endlessly dissect and condemn. I started losing customers immediately after Silas's post went live that morning. Numerous large maintenance contracts were summarily canceled, our company's social media accounts were utterly overwhelmed with hate messages, and I received vicious emails in my private inbox. I knew I risked closing my entire business operation if I didn't take immediate action. That very afternoon, I went to see Marcus, my longtime friend and business attorney. He had been the one who helped me draft my first shop lease. I sent him a single text message without even calling. "I urgently need to see you right now." Marcus fit me in between two critical meetings. His office was immaculate, silent, and beautifully lit by a sheer wall of windows when I arrived. As I recounted the entire saga, he sat calmly behind his large mahogany desk with his fingers laced together in thought. I presented him with printed out hate comments, a clear graph of revenue figures demonstrating the financial damage, and a crucial screenshot of Silas's original libelous post, which I had thankfully saved. After I finished speaking, he finally looked up, folded his arms across his chest, and offered me an enigmatic half-smile I couldn't interpret. Then Marcus simply stated, "Ethan, you just hit the legal jackpot." I frowned, totally confused, and cautiously inquired, "What do you mean by that?" Marcus chuckled softly and leaned his large head toward me. "I mean, you have nothing left to stress about. Every single action Silas has taken, the inflammatory post, the severe damage to your company and your personal and brand reputation, all of it amounts to an extremely solid civil defamation case. And with the volume of evidence you've already collected, I can confidently tell you right now, you're looking at a potentially massive financial payout." I felt an immense weight physically lift from my shoulders. Marcus continued, completely calm. "Silas is going to be held fully accountable for his actions, both legally and financially, and if the court delivers a fair ruling, the awarded compensation could far exceed every loss you have sustained." I stopped talking, simply nodded, opened my laptop bag, placed my prepared evidence folder on the table, and informed Marcus, "Draft the case immediately. I'm granting you my full authority to manage this completely."
Marcus offered a faint smile and shook my hand. Not like he was congratulating me, but like it was the official starting line. That afternoon, I formally signed the power of attorney. This time, there was no wishy-washy text, no waiting for someone to suddenly have a change of heart, and no emotional hesitation. I was going to sue. For the first time, I felt completely guilt-free about it. Just a few weeks after I signed the authorization, Silas's lawyer contacted Marcus, desperate for settlement discussions, which didn't surprise me at all. They only come to the negotiating table when they're cornered. They only pretend to want gentle resolutions after they've totally lost control. As I anticipated, Marcus requested my presence at his office that Thursday afternoon. He casually produced a slender file and commented, "Your family has a new financial proposition to make." I just looked directly at him and said nothing. Marcus opened the file, slid the top page across the desk toward me, and continued. "They are proposing to sell you the main company. In exchange, they'd like to retain positions as internal consultants." I quickly scanned the fine print. Nothing was technically wrong or illogical, but all I truly wanted was to never associate with them again. I looked up, my voice calm and precise, completely devoid of any bitterness, like a man who was utterly done with needless concessions. "Tell them I have absolutely no interest." Marcus gave a slight, knowing nod and asked no follow-up questions. I stood up, retrieved my coat, and told him before walking out, "I am not purchasing the company. I am certainly not hiring relatives as financial consultants." I paused for a moment and then added the final thought. I refuse to bail out a family just to continue being treated like a walking ATM. The civil trial commenced exactly 3 months after Silas initially uploaded the malicious information. Although the county courthouse in San Jose wasn't far from my flat, I left super early that morning. I needed a few minutes of quiet solitude in the car to breathe, gather my emotional strength, and vividly remind myself that I was doing the correct thing for justice, not fueled by lingering anger. I entered the courtroom and immediately spotted Silas sitting right next to his defense lawyer, looking visibly anxious. The arrogance and contemptuous smirk he had aimed at me back at my house were completely gone. He mostly kept his gaze fixed downward that day. I looked straight ahead. Marcus was thoroughly prepared. He meticulously itemized every single financial loss: the canceled contracts, the short-term shop closures, the documented income declines, and the necessitated employee compensation. Official documents, receipts, and detailed spreadsheets supported every single claim. Nothing was exaggerated.
Silas's legal team weakly argued that the online message was purely personal, that they hadn't anticipated the commercial repercussions, and that people had somehow misinterpreted the words. But no rational person in that courtroom believed that nearly 30,000 shares were the result of a simple misunderstanding. I kept my head bowed as the judge began to read the final summary judgment. I felt no urge to look at Silas. My parents weren't present, so I didn't search for their reaction. I listened calmly as the words were delivered. The defendant, Silas Blackwood, is hereby found liable for significant commercial damages and is legally ordered to compensate the plaintiff, Ethan Blackwood, for all direct losses, totaling $265,000. Silence followed the delivery of the verdict. I rose to my feet. I did not look at Silas. They were not in the room, so I did not wait for their response. I simply walked out of the courtroom, putting a definite period at the end of a long, convoluted sentence that should never have been started. I had won, not to spite anyone, but because I had finally stopped giving in. After the legal proceedings concluded, I heard that Silas had been forced to sell the company, which was once touted as the family legacy, and his own apartment to manage the payment of my $265,000. I didn't ask for specifics, investigate the details, or question his methods. I simply stopped caring. I only needed the confirmation that they had disregarded my explicit warning. They chose their path, and so they paid the full consequence. The subsequent 6 months were surprisingly peaceful. But 3 days ago, early in the morning, the past returned in a distressingly familiar manner. It was a cold Saturday, and my doorbell rang promptly at 7 a.m., the exact same time they had initially requested the $140,000. The sky was an unpleasant, dismal gray. After I opened the door, I was stunned to see my mother, Mrs. Blackwood. Her eyes were red-shot, her face deeply strained, and her hand was clutching her handbag strapped tightly, as if it were the only thing preventing her from completely breaking down. At first, she remained utterly silent. Her voice was small and hoarse as she finally spoke. "Your father, he is admitted to the hospital. This is quite serious this time. The required treatment is projected to cost close to $25,000. I know, Ethan, I know I made grave errors, but please, just one last time, help me." I stood perfectly still. I felt no anger then. My deep well of pity was completely dry, replaced only by that hollow feeling in my chest, a familiar sensation I had experienced too often when I realized I was being drawn back into the same toxic cycle. I held her gaze for a long time. I whispered, sounding more like a quiet exhale, "For me, my appearance effectively ceased to exist the day both of you let Silas actively try to destroy my career, and you both remain silent. And I don't give money to the dead." She froze instantly. There were no tears, no further pleas. Standing there with her lips slightly twitching, she seemed desperately wanting to say something, but found herself incapable. I didn't waste any more time. I took a deep, steady breath and said clearly, "Ask your chosen heir." I calmly and deliberately closed the door, ensuring she understood it would not open again. Some of you reading this may now believe I'm vicious, cold-hearted, or completely unforgiving. If that's your immediate reaction, I urge you not to pass judgment immediately. In fact, I did go to the hospital that later afternoon after my mother had left. I avoided my father's specific room. I didn't stand there by the window like the cliché in the movies. I simply called the central information desk with his full name and requested a clear update. I went there only to verify the truth of her claim. Indeed, her story was accurate. My father was seriously hospitalized, and his course of treatment was estimated to cost approximately $25,000. My financial records were right in front of me. I nearly took out my corporate credit card. However, my mind instantly flashed back to that Memorial Day a year earlier, when they proudly lifted their glasses, publicly transferred everything to Silas, and implored me to simply understand. I contacted a few trusted people the next morning, still unsettled from the previous day's encounter. I confirmed that my parents still owned their large house through reliable real estate contacts. It was completely free of any mortgages or holds, and holds a market value of about $450,000. They have the clear ability to readily sell such a valuable asset to fully cover the medical expenses. I did not pay the hospital fees. I drafted one final message to my mother. "You still own the house. Sell the asset to pay for Dad's treatment." She never replied. She may have hesitated out of sentimentality, or perhaps because that house was always secretly meant for Silas. Maybe she truly believed I wouldn't intervene and rescue them again. Regardless of her personal reasons, I don't care anymore. It is entirely up to them to choose whether to sell or keep it. I have firmly made my own choice. I will not be returning. After everything that has happened, I harbor no lingering expectations from my biological family. I still fundamentally believe in the concept of family, but now I know that family is not exclusively defined by where you were born. Sometimes you must choose where you truly belong. I once thought they would eventually recognize my hard work and personal sacrifices if I just kept trying hard enough. But some people only begin to appreciate what you have generously given when you are finally done giving. I don't want the story to leave anyone feeling angry or sad. I'm sharing it because I genuinely think someone out there is listening, someone who is currently in my former shoes, expected to carry the weight and expected to grant constant comprehension, only because they managed to succeed, are now expected to perpetually remain the strong one. I will tell you one essential thing. You are not a horrible person for refusing a demand. You are not being selfish for walking away from repeated abuse. Sometimes kindness must have clear, firm limits. Sometimes a one-sided connection must be severed completely if you are the only one desperately holding on. Before I sign off, I want to pose this question to you, the dedicated viewers who have listened to the entire story until the end. Was I really wrong for finally leaving a family that had repeatedly treated me like nothing more than a backup plan and coldly abandoned me the moment I had nothing left to contribute? Was I overly harsh for absolutely refusing to help the people who had publicly rejected me, especially when I needed their support the most? Thanks for sticking around and diving into this tumultuous family saga with me. If you enjoyed dramatic family narratives, don't forget to subscribe and activate your notifications so you never miss the next one.
So that's my story. It wasn't easy to leave the people I once considered my foundation, but sometimes walking away is the only way to save yourself. I finally learned that real family isn't guaranteed by blood. It's earned through respect and loyalty. If you've ever had to make a tough decision to protect your peace, I want to hear it. Hit the like button if you agree that boundaries are necessary. And let me know in the comments, do you think I handled this the right way in the end? Thanks for watching.